let's get on to the fourth horse. All right, so the next little section for us to read, and this will be the final one for the afternoon.
Which one?
The fourth horse is the pale horse.
Oh, yes.
All right, so we're going to have a read. We're looking at Revelation chapter 6, verses 7 and 8.
When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth.
Thank you. It's a rosy picture, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So as with all of the previous seals before this one, we have the Lamb breaking the fourth seal on this scroll. We know that the Lamb is Jesus, and he is the kinsman redeemer who is qualified and authorised to be breaking these seals. He's the only one who's uniquely qualified. And if we remember, this scroll represents, or is, the title deed to the earth. I know this feels a bit repetitive, but it's important that we, just for the sake of anyone who's just listening to this one section, it's important that we cover that. So we have the fourth living being, and there's only 4 of these living beings or creatures that are surrounding the throne of God. And this fourth living being says, "Come." Now, some translations say "come and see," but in the Greek it is quite clearly just "come." And this is a direction to bring forth this fourth horseman. Now, like all of the horses before it, the colour of the horse is significant. The colour is not grey. Historically, a lot of people have been taught that this is a pale horse, so it's like a grey horse. But this colour is the colour chloros, which is where we get chlorophyll. Chloros. Yep, it's a pale greeny grey, this horse. And the colour... So, it is. So, depending on the context, this colour chloros can have slightly different colours. So, it's the colour, the word that we get chlorophyll from, which is the green in plants, which is a bright, vivid green. But when we're talking about people, the only time we expect people to be the colour chloros is the colour of, it's literally dead people, the colour of death and the colour of a corpse, basically. So, when the Jews are hearing that this horse is the colour of a corpse, they know that this is bringing death by association. And it shouldn't be surprising that the name of the rider of this horse, we didn't get names for the other ones, but this rider is Death. Now, not death as a concept, but like a symbolic death riding the horse, but this is death personified. The process of personification is where we take an inanimate object or a concept and we imagine that concept as having a personality, right? As if death was a person. This is who is riding the pale horse. So we've got a horse of death ridden by death, and followed by Hades, or the Greek word Hades, which literally means the grave. So it makes sense, because when people die, they tend to stink up the place unless you bury them or put them in the tomb while they degrade. So it makes sense that after death, we've got the grave following. All right? So this isn't talking about hell. This is talking about literally the grave. So we've got a whole bunch of death, and then all those people need to be buried or dealt with. Now, these two, Death and Hades, are given authority over 1/4 of the earth. Now, if we think of the global population, it's around 8 billion people. Mind you, we've had the Christian church raptured out of there. There's probably a few people who have died as part of the Red Horse War. There's probably some people who have died through the famine as well. Okay, but just the death that follows along behind the war and the famine, 2 billion people have died. Now, I kind of did a bit of research because I'm like, it's hard to visualise 2 billion people. How many people are we talking about? The population of China is around 1.4 billion people. Right?
India, don't know.
India is also around 1.4 billion people, very close to one another in size. So China and India together, 2.8 billion. So that's slightly more than what we're talking about, but really we're in that kind of realm. Yeah. The population of Africa is also around 1.4 billion. And if you add together Europe and North America, they're also at about 1.4 billion. We're talking about a heck of a lot of people
Yes.
who are going to die in this first, in the fourth seal of the tribulation. So within a couple of years, we know that all of this stuff has to have unfolded within the first 3.5 years, including all of the trumpet judgments. So not very long for a quarter of the population of the earth to die, the remaining population after the rapture. Now these guys are given the permission to kill with the sword. Now we've already seen the sword being used to kill as part of the red horse. Whether this killing is part of that process or whether it follows its own discrete step as an extra lot, we're not 100% sure, although the fact that they've been unrolled systematically, each of these seals being broken one after the other, kind of indicates this is a separate event. Yeah, so there's probably a bunch of people who've been killed as part of the Red Horse conflict, and then there's these ones on top of that.
People are going to die the same way as with the first, second, and third.
Yes. Yep. So we've got the sword, the red horse. We've got famine, the black horse. We've got diseases or plagues. And the wild animals is also interesting. So these are Therion. This is non-domesticated animals. So it could include rats. Rats have been responsible for a lot of plague spread over time.
Yeah.
If you've got people dying of a plague and they've got no immune systems, it probably doesn't take much of an animal issue to spread that around. We're not sure exactly why. We just know that there's going to be about 2 billion people who die. And that's significant. Like, you look at the death rates we've got now, it's nowhere near 1 in 4. This is 1 in 4 people across the whole earth. All right? It's significant. And we're not even into the bit where people who have faith being martyred.
No.
This is just purely earthly stuff, sorting out earthly stuff. Okay? That's essentially all we need to cover for this course. What we need to understand is there is a lot of death coming when this fourth seal is open. Okay? Next time, we're going to look at the fifth seal. They kind of roll.
That's the next one.
So the
All
fifth
of
seal
this has happened early in the second half of the tribulation.
early in the first half of the tribulation. This is right at the start. Yep, we're not at the midpoint yet.
I thought there was going to be peace for 3.5 years, but no.
There's going to be peace. There's going to be a 7-year peace treaty
Yeah.
that applies to these countries in the middle of this map. They're going to sign a peace treaty, but that peace treaty doesn't cover this lot from the north and this lot from Africa who we're going to invade them. They're not bound by the terms of that peace treaty.
I thought there was going to be peace for 3.5 years.
Yeah,
Then
no.
the Antichrist was going to go back on his word.
And he will, 3.5 years in, and that's when Satan gets kicked out of heaven and he starts pursuing the Jews and they go into exile.
Yeah.
So we've got the rebuilding of the temple that happens in this first period, but there's a lot of other stuff unfolding as it goes. Yeah, this is all alongside those first 3 years. So it's not 3 years of peace and prosperity. It's we sign a peace treaty that covers this little zone, but there's all this other calamity that happens in, around, and through that. And then for the second half, the Jews are actually they've been pursued off into the place that God has for them. So so there are our first 4 seals. It's not going to be fun. Well, we really do want to be raptured out of here. We want to not be here. We want Jesus to be keeping us out of this time of trial. But if we find ourselves in the midst of the time of trial, there are things that we need to know about. And why we're going to be talking about the mark and how that comes about and how to avoid it.